Imagine a single nation with one language, one culture, and centuries of shared history suddenly torn apart into two of the most opposite countries on Earth. On one side, neon-lit cities, K-pop idols, and global technology giants. On the other, barbed wire borders, secretive leadership, and a regime frozen in time. But this division didn't just happen overnight. It was the result of foreign powers, betrayals, and choices that shocked the Korean people and changed the future of Asia forever. Korea before foreign domination. For centuries, Korea stood as a unified kingdom, proud of its traditions and determined to protect them. During the 1800s, under the guidance of Lee Ha-young, known as Daewongun, the country slammed its doors shut to Western influence. Foreign ships were driven away, though sometimes violently, as Korea tried to hold on to its independence, but isolation couldn't last forever. When Daewongun stepped aside in 1873, Japan saw its chance. Warships appeared on Korean shores, pressuring the kingdom into signing a treaty that opened its ports to Japanese trade. Overnight, Korea found itself caught in a dangerous game of tug-of-war between powerful neighbors, China, Japan, and the Western nations, all circling, waiting to claim their piece of the peninsula. Japan and China clash over Korea. The struggle for control over Korea quickly escalated. In 1884, a group of pro-Japanese radicals staged a daring coup, hoping to drag the kingdom into rapid modernization. But just 3 days later, Chinese troops stormed in, crushing the movement and leaving Korea trapped between two giants. The tension finally exploded in 1894 with the Sino-Japanese War. Japan's modern military overwhelmed China, forcing the Treaty of Shimonoseki, which handed Japan the upper hand in Korea. But Korea's nightmare wasn't over. Russia, determined to expand its influence, pushed back against Japan's growing power. In the chaos, Korea's Queen Min, an outspoken critic of Japan, was brutally assassinated by Japanese agents in 1895. Her death sent shockwaves through the nation, leaving King Gojong desperate. In a bid for survival, he turned to Russia for protection, giving away concessions and igniting even more foreign meddling in Korean affairs. Annexation of Korea by Japan. By the early 1900s, the tug-of-war over Korea reached its breaking point. The Russo-Japanese War erupted in 1904, and once again, Japan proved unstoppable. Victory secured Japan's dominance in the region, and soon after, Korea's sovereignty began to vanish piece by piece. In 1910, the unthinkable happened. Japan formally annexed Korea, transforming it into a colony. Overnight, Koreans lost freedom of speech, their press was silenced, and their schools were taken over to push Japanese language and history while erasing their own. Land was seized, businesses destroyed, and villages stripped of identity. Yet the Korean people resisted. Guerrilla fighters harassed Japanese forces, risking everything for freedom. And in 1919, a wave of hope swept the nation when Emperor Gojong's death sparked mass demonstrations. Hundreds of thousands marched in the March 1st movement, reading aloud Korea's Declaration of Independence. But Japan's response was swift and brutal. Soldiers opened fire, tens of thousands were arrested, and dreams of freedom were crushed. For now, rise of nationalism and World War II. Even under Japan's iron grip, the spirit of resistance refused to die. In Shanghai, exiled leaders formed a provisional Korean government, electing Syngman Rhee as president and keeping the dream of independence alive. Meanwhile, inside Korea, daily life was turned upside down. Farmers were forced to convert their fields into rice paddies, only to see their harvests shipped off to Japan, leaving many Koreans to survive on cheap imported grains. The oppression grew even harsher in the 1930s. Koreans were ordered to abandon their names, adopt Japanese ones, and bow at Shinto shrines. Publications in the Korean language were banned, and young men were drafted into Japan's army or sent to labor in mines and factories. Thousands of women were forced into the nightmare of becoming comfort women for Japanese soldiers. But when World War II erupted, resistance reignited. In 1941, the Korean Provisional Government declared war on Japan and raised the Korean Restoration Army, fighting alongside Allied forces in hopes that victory would finally bring liberation. When Japan surrendered in 1945, it seemed like Korea's long struggle had finally been won. But the reality was far more complicated: liberation and unexpected division. When Japan finally surrendered in August 1945, Koreans filled the streets with joy. 35 years of colonial rule had ended, and independence felt felt within reach. But behind closed doors, foreign powers were already redrawing the map of Korea's future. The United States and the Soviet Union agreed that Japanese forces north of the 38th parallel would surrender to the Soviets, while those in the south would surrender to the Americans. What was meant as a temporary military arrangement suddenly became the line that split a nation in half. Families were divided overnight, communities torn apart, and chaos erupted as Koreans realized their long-awaited freedom had been hijacked by outside powers. The division was never voted on, never agreed to by the Korean people. It was simply imposed. For many, it felt like liberation had transformed into betrayal, and what followed would shape the destiny of the peninsula for generations. South Korea's struggles. In the South, independence quickly turned into political chaos. Dozens of new parties sprang up, all claiming to represent the people's voice. On September 6, 1945, a National Assembly even declared the People's Republic of Korea. But the U.S. military refused to recognize it, insisting that only they could govern. For Koreans who had just thrown off the Japanese rule, this felt like another occupation, this time by a supposed ally. The frustration boiled over when in December 1945, the U.S., Britain, and the Soviet Union announced a 5-year trusteeship over Korea. Instead of freedom, Koreans were told to wait. The news triggered riots, violence, and deepening distrust. To calm the unrest, the U.S. backed the creation of a representative democratic council led by Syngman Rhee, a fiery nationalist who had spent years in exile. By 1948, Rhee was firmly in power, and the Republic of Korea was officially born. The United Nations recognized it as the only legal government in the South. But north of the 38th parallel, a very different story was unfolding. North Korea's path to communism. While the South wrestled with chaos and U.S. oversight, the North moved quickly under Soviet control. In 1945, a little-known guerrilla fighter named Kim Il-sung arrived in Pyongyang dressed in a Red Army uniform. To many Koreans, he was presented as a national hero, handpicked by Moscow to lead the new order. Backed by Soviet soldiers and resources, Kim rose swiftly, becoming chairman of the Provisional People's Committee for North Korea by early 1946. From there, the Soviet model was copied step by step. Land reforms stripped property from landlords and redistributed it to peasants, winning early support. Political opponents vanished, and power became concentrated in Kim's hands. By 1948, North Korea held its own elections, and Kim was declared premier of the newly formed Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Soviet Union recognized his government as the only true Korea, setting the stage for a bitter standoff with the South, legacy of the division. By 1948, the peninsula had split into two rival states, each claiming to be the one true Korea. In the South, Syngman Rhee led the Republic of Korea with U.S. backing. In the North, Kim Il-sung ruled the Democratic People's Republic of Korea with the support of the Soviet Union. What was supposed to be temporary had hardened into a permanent divide. Over the decades that followed, the contrast only grew sharper. North Korea became a closed, hereditary dictatorship cut off from the outside world. South Korea, after years of struggle, evolved into a thriving democracy and an economic powerhouse. The 38th parallel became more than a line on a map. It became one of the most dangerous borders on Earth, a living symbol of the Cold War. More than 70 years later, families are still separated, and the dream of reunification remains uncertain. Korea's story is a reminder that the fate of nations can be rewritten in moments, sometimes not by the people themselves, but by the powers that claim to liberate them. The division of Korea wasn't born out of choice. It was carved by foreign hands, cemented by clashing ideologies, and fueled by leaders determined to hold power at any cost. What began as a temporary military arrangement hardened into one of history's most enduring divides. Today, South Korea stands as a global symbol of progress, while North Korea remains locked in secrecy and control. And yet behind the politics and barbed wire, there's something deeper. Millions of Koreans on both sides who still share the same history, culture, and hope for a future that feels whole again. Whether that day will ever come remains one of the world's greatest unanswered questions. History has shown us how quickly the destiny of a nation can change, and Korea's story is one of the most dramatic examples. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button so more people can uncover the hidden history behind today's headlines. What do you think? Will Korea ever reunite, or has the divide grown too deep? Share your thoughts in the comments below. show. I'd love to hear your perspective, and if you want more powerful stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are so many untold chapters of history waiting to be revealed, and you won't want to miss them.